All right, folks, back here on DM Radio. And next up, I have a true innovator in the data space doing some really, really cool stuff that I've personally been dreaming about for years. So I'm very happy to have someone on the show who's doing the kind of cool stuff that I knew was possible and would be coming down the pike. Jason Ambrose is the CEO of people.ai. And Jason, if I understand it correctly, you are allowing organizations to leverage all of their unstructured data in a very targeted, sales oriented fashion, or there are other use cases as well, to the point where you're actually connecting to Zoom, to CRM, to other, to even email of employees, and you capture all that information and you put it into a vector store essentially that is private to the client. And then your AI is in the background looking for ways to parse this information and present it as opportunities for salespeople or for other business development activities. Is that right?
That's right, Eric. You've got it pretty close to on the head. Just a little couple points of expansion on what you said. So yes, we take in all this information, this activity, what's happening, and our AI figures out how to make sense of it and match that to your understanding of what's happening in your selling process, which typically sits in CRM. And
Hmm.
you're right that it's not just use cases around selling, but it could be with anything that you want to learn to get answers about what's happening with your customers and the way that they're talking to your field. I think the new thing that's coming out now is historically we've done this by attaching this to CRM records, in a world where
Hmm.
humans had to do everything and that was a system to do it. Now with our MCP interface, the new thing which I think keeps in the trend that we're seeing is we have to figure out how agents are going to fit into all of this. So now it's pretty cool. I can have Claude sit there and ask a bunch of questions of our AI and work out an answer that it needs to figure out to a question I've posed to it. So that's the new piece in our world. But you're right in terms of what we do and the hard work around matching that unstructured information to an understanding of what's happening in selling.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm not even joking when I say that I've dreamt of this day, especially once the LLMs came out a few years ago. It's like, oh, wow, we're finally going to be able to do this kind of thing. Because you think of CRM, think Salesforce, for example. I mean, Salesforce is the poster child of software as a
Yeah.
service. They were the first major juggernaut in the space. They're huge. I mean, Benioff is an absolute business genius. He's built this gigantic stack of all these amazing technologies. I mean, it's not new technologies, right? So they're trying to inject some AI into the picture here. But Salesforce has tremendous amounts of information that are extremely difficult to get to and to make any use of, except on a one-to-one sort of basis of a human being going through and reading something. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the early CRM solutions where you would try to put in some rules and say, okay, you have to fill in the notes field. And someone's like, really? Do I have to fill in the notes field? And like 1 out of 10 would put 10 paragraphs and everyone else would just put out a comma, right? And then they would just drag. They would be so slow that you wouldn't even want to use it. You wouldn't even do sales calls because you had to fill out this stupid thing afterwards. I mean, I've seen the pain, the battle scars over the years. And for now, for someone to come along and be able to absorb this massive amount of unstructured text, which is the gold of your business. I mean, that
Yeah.
is your business. That's the language of your business. To be able to reveal that and open it up to your salespeople, I think that is just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think to your point on CRM, so I spent 15 some years doing, helping customers adopt CRM. And I think what always struck me is the fundamental way that it works hasn't changed from the days that Tom
Right,
Siebel had guys sitting
right.
down with suits and
Siebel
ties
Analytics.
and
That's right.
typing information in to, a
That's funny.
terminal, before they faxed their sales order over to somebody. Right? It's the same thing.
That's funny.
So yeah, so it changes, and we've been at it for a while. But I think now with what's happening in AI, we see it as a big opportunity, and we're excited to be working through some of our customers with that.
Well, you've opened a door to all sorts of new ways of learning about the business. So one of the ideas that I had, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, you may kind of have what I had envisioned. Maybe it's 2.5 years ago now. I was going to the Boomi conference, data
Yeah,
integration SaaS platform. Steve Lucas, I've known for years, super nice guy, their CEO. And I was thinking to myself, now, if you had a small language model, on your in your data center, and you could train it on all of your data, everything from Jira tickets to emails to accounting or whatever, like everything you want to give it, and you'd set up Kafka topics to stream into your own vector store. Well, you could have this, what I call the executive cockpit, where the CEO can then just sit there and ask any question about what's happening in the business in any region, like where are we, in terms of market penetration per budget in the Southeast or in the Northwest or whatever, and get back answers with real information through a system like this. Whereas in the past, you'd have to log into the CRM, find some dashboard that someone had built, and like do all this just archaic Byzantine stuff to try to get answers, which means you didn't even try. You just waited and asked someone a question. Now you can do all that. Is that about right?
You hit it right on the head. So one of our clients, Red Hat, the CEO, uses the tool for exactly that. So, what always struck me is I think about an executive who just wants to get an answer, right? And they have to go ask somebody.
Right.
And it's amazing
Which is
how long it
crazy.
takes, right? And then it's got to go through all these layers of people who got to prepare it and spin it and do whatever else. And it's like, I wanted the answer in 5 minutes, not 5 days, right?
Right.
And now you can go
That's right.
right to the source of the information. So there's no interpretation. It's just working directly off of what did that customer email to that sales rep.
Right. Right. And if you can get right to that, I mean, this is next generation search is really what it boils down to, but it can be so granular and you can get your questions answered. And this also changes fundamentally management meetings because it
Yes.
used to be that you were the CEO. I mean, you're a CEO, so you'd have all your direct reports come in, like, all right, Bob, what's happening? Sue, what's happening? Fred, what's going on? Okay, and then all of a sudden the meeting's over and you haven't even decided anything. Now you know what's going on. You're like, hey, about that contract in the Southeast, let's do this, let's do that, or whatever. You suddenly have productive meetings where it used to be, a bunch of food fights and trying to suss out who's actually telling the truth, and all that stuff's out the window now, right?
Yeah. And so much of it was how well did they know their stuff, right? So you would
Right.
ask a bunch of questions to see did they really understand what's happening in their business? But now you know just as well as they do, so you can get right to the problem solving of what do we need to go figure out together.
Right. And that's what management is supposed to be. That's what a good manager
Yeah.
does, is works with people. I've got a lot of theories about different management styles and kind of how we got here and why things are the way they are. And from a sort of socio cultural perspective, I think this is very good news because if the boss knows everything that's happening, now you're not going to get people playing games and hiding information, which is what we've done for years. But
Yeah.
instead, to your point, you can just get down to problem solving. That's what helps businesses do better, right?
That's the theory, right? It is a lot of cultural change, right? We all have to lean into this and understand, yeah, now we can actually sit down and do the work, right? It's not about managing how information is perceived. It's using
Right.
that information to make decisions and have the answers so that you can go take action. You're
Right.
right, but I do think there's a big cultural change coming at all levels of organizations that kind of misses, we talk about the fact that so much is focused on, automation and efficiency, right? Like let's get people more productive. But if you don't know the right things to do for efficacy and how to be effective, what's the point?
Right.
My joke is, okay, it's going to take a salesperson a lot less time to miss their number, right?
Right. That's pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
But time to awareness, maybe that's a new thing, right? Like they have
Yeah.
time to action, time to insight, time to awareness is pretty important because if you don't know there's a problem, well, you're just, you are literally ignorant of that problem. But it is a problem somewhere. And I think what's cool is that now we can all be on the same page. Like it's the Olivia Dean song, let's get on the same page. That's
Yeah.
what you want. It's been a metaphor for years and years and years. Now you can actually do that. I mean, there's still ambiguity. Large language models are not perfect. They still have problems. You still have to kind of think, wait a minute, is that right? But nonetheless, they are very good at sort of, they don't even summarize technically, right? Because they essentially reproduce or regenerate based upon a new prompt with some instructions. But nonetheless, that is head and shoulders above everything else that we've seen in the world today. Well, folks, we got our podcast bonus segment coming up next here, talking to Jason Ambrose from people.ai. And I'm not even kidding, man. I've been thinking about this for a while. And I finally found someone who is focused on that exact problem of being able to tap into all this unstructured data in your organization. That is your business. That is how people have spoken to each other in your business, how they've spoken to customers. You can also track which messaging works well, what leads to better sales outcomes. All that stuff is what's possible now. We'll be right back with the podcast bonus segment. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, back on the podcast bonus segment here, Jason Ambrose of people.ai. So, Jason, you said you've been at this stuff for a while. When did you guys start working on this?
It's been almost 10 years now.
Wow.
So our founder, Oleg, saw in the very early days, he actually was in the same YC class as Sam Altman. So he had a sense of where AI
Wow.
was going to go. And he, as somebody who was working in sales, he could see that CRM was just kind of a waste of time from his perspective. So we were pretty ahead of the game in that respect, which has been a long march because we had to work on this notion of activity capture and how to associate it with CRM records, and AI wasn't quite there. It's in the last couple of years that we've been able to apply our own AI on top of what we've built, and then now more recently make that available to first agents. You touched on this in the previous segment, but you were kind of getting to this idea of small language models and sort of proprietary information with customer data.
Right.
That's the world of expert agents. So we see us as being one of those expert agents where we deeply specialize in helping you understand what's going on in sales.
Hmm.
Could be the same in other function with other data sources, but you make that available to generalist LLMs that really kind of become your interface and understand you and how you like to see information and how you like to ask about it to bring
Hmm.
that to you. So
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's been a long journey, but the time is right for us. The benefit is, we've been looking at business cycles pre-COVID, post-COVID, ups, downs. We've sort of seen all the trends at this point.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you also said something earlier that I find fascinating. You said you can sort of understand the account structure from a CRM tool, for example. And who was saying the other day that SaaS is dead, software service is dead? I don't think that's true. I do understand where they're going with it. I mean, there are
Yeah,
huge gaping holes in the traditional SaaS business model. One, my buddy was telling me the other day, is just think about licenses. They've built by licenses for years, and big companies go and they buy their 1,000 Tableau licenses and they use 472 of them. Well, that's a lot of wasted money for a particular type of functionality, right? This is what you need is functionality across workflows. That's what it really boils down to. So solutions like this, once you absorb a lot of that stuff, especially because you can understand account structures. I mean, that's fascinating. Could you maybe just dive into that a little bit? Because one thing that LLMs don't do very well is understand tables, right? Or table
yeah.
structures. That's, I guess, why you have MCP, but still, it's not quite like SQL or, traditional means of accessing that sort of nested or formatted data. Like, what do you have under the covers that you're able to sort of parse and understand these account structures?
I think you've hit on the key point, which is how do you map unstructured data to structured data, right? And you're picking the account hierarchy as a data structure to illustrate this point. But this is
Right,
what is hard, right? So
right.
how do I look at a series of emails and understand, let's just make up names, right? Microsoft is trying to sell to Verizon, right? Well, Verizon has a lot of different business units. They
Right.
organize their business in a certain way. You organize your field in a certain way to overlay with that. So what's the right place to put this activity in that structure? That's the hard part in the math underneath what we do that comes from looking at a lot of different examples of this. And we don't always get it right, but that is a core problem that these expert agents will need to solve. We happen to specialize in the space of go to market, but you can imagine the same kind of things in supply chain or other parts of the organization, finance over time. It's the same kind
Sure.
of thing. They work with structured data, but how do you get the full story by bringing the context in from the unstructured data to have a complete picture, both quantitative and qualitative, of what's happening
Right.
That's the magic that's opened up.
Yeah. Well, and we got just a few minutes left here. You've hinted at this a couple times and even come out and referred to expert agents. And I'm actually writing an article right now for another client that they're actually the folks who gave us the ODBC and JDBC drivers years and years ago. It's
Oh
now
yeah.
part of Insight Software. So those are the workhorses, right? But I'm writing an article about AI, agentic AI, and it's like, man alive, there's a mutiny on the bounty, right? We're hearing about these wacko agents doing stuff. I think a lot of that stuff is a bit overblown, but still, you give an automaton access to your API keys and stuff, and it could actually go do bad things for you. So you have to watch out for that. But this whole agentic need of data, those are very different access patterns than what we're
Yeah.
used to in all these traditional systems. So to me, whether it's the network or somewhere in this end-to-end process, there's going to need to be scale out and scale down capabilities to manage that kind of data flow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Back to your point on, is SaaS dead and what does it mean, right? I think whatever happens, in the same way that we had to govern users, we've got to govern these agents. And I think all of these things are getting to this idea that, hey, software is going to do the work itself in the same way that humans did. So what's the right level of supervision, human to human, human to
Right,
agent,
right,
all of those questions, and how do you govern it, enforce it, and make sure that these things are constrained and protected and
right,
that the results are in the right place. So you're right. I think
right.
this is I think we can all agree that this is the new change in the paradigm that we're all working through. So whether SaaS lives, dies, succeeds, grows, who knows, right?
Right.
But this certainly is what's going to change.
Yeah, well, so people.ai, and you've got this
Yes.
announcement. You've got Red Hat as a client. I'm a huge fan of open source. I've been lobbying for open source for 21 years or so since I wrapped my head around what it means. It actually took a lot longer than I thought to seriously disrupt the status quo, and the status quo is still there. I mean,
Yeah.
Amazon is a huge company. For a while, they were accused of strip mining open source, but I understand they've gotten a bit more kind to the environment because open source is foundational to the technology space, right? So it's a pretty cool client you've got there. Final thoughts from you on what people should know about people.ai.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it right at the outset is, we provide those answers in a way that's actionable either to the humans or the agents. And, it's increasingly important in this world of what do we figure out what we want to do and where we want our sellers spending our time. So we look forward to chatting with anybody who's interested.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I think one of your taglines could be saving CRM
Yeah,
because
or maybe not, right?
yeah,
Maybe that's something different, right?
yeah.
We'll see what the future holds.
Well, it's you're enabling delivery of long promised value, I guess is what
I
I would
think that's
suggest
you're
about it.
exactly right. That's the key question of what were we really trying to accomplish and how do we
Right,
get it?
right. And you did it. Well, look these gentlemen up online. Jason Ambrose, Ambrose of people.ai. Very cool stuff. Talk to you next time, folks. You've been listening to DM Radio.